Alright, in this video, we're going to be implementing what we learned in the previous video about pseudo-classes on our Quill project. Now, the first thing we need to talk about is where exactly are we going to add these pseudo-classes. We actually don't need to add the pseudo-classes onto this button class here. And that's because it's setting up the overall structure of the button. We only really care about the state changes of the button, like when you're hovering or when it's visited, for the actual specific button styles. So button primary and button secondary. So let's do the first group of pseudo-classes. We'll do button primary and add the pseudo-class link, which again targets anchor tags that have not yet been visited. And we're going to be grouping that with button primary and the pseudo-class visited, which as a reminder, targets anchor tags that have been visited. We'll grab our curly bracket and we'll just give this the same color as before. And I'm now going to get rid of this style here, as we don't need it anymore, as we're now implementing better practice, targeting all four states of our button. We'll then add the next group of pseudo-classes. So we'll grab our class, btn-primary, and the pseudo-class hover, which as a reminder, targets the anchor tag when the cursor is hovering over it. And we'll group this with button primary and the active pseudo-class, which as a reminder, targets an element when it is being clicked. We'll grab our curly brackets, and let's now add a darker color of this blue. We'll scroll up to the UI guide we created at the top. And let's add our primary shade, this deep sea color here. And we'll go ahead and implement this exact same method for our secondary button. We'll grab our secondary button, add the link pseudo-class, grab the secondary button and add the visited pseudo-class, grab curly brackets, and we'll use the same color here. We'll then get rid of this as we no longer need it. We'll then add the other group of pseudo-classes. We'll grab button secondary, add the hover pseudo-class, get button secondary again, and grab the active pseudo-class. For the color here, let's go grab a shade of this purple. Scrolling up to the top, this purple is lavender, it's our secondary base color. For the shade, we called it Velvet Night. And it has this hex code here, so I'll simply copy that and paste it here as the color value. So let's now check this out in the browser. So our get started anchor tag here has the btn primary style applied to it. Just as a reminder, if I head to index.html, you can see here this anchor tag has the class btn and btn primary. So with our pseudo-classes, we've now targeted this primary button and considered all the different states. At the moment, the get started button is this blue here, because it's a link which hasn't yet been clicked. If I hover over it, you'll notice that it goes a darker blue. And that's this pseudo-class coming into play. The hover pseudo-class is making it this slightly darker blue. I'm now going to click on it but hold my mouse to show you the active pseudo-class. I am holding my mouse and you won't actually notice a change in color, and that's because the hover pseudo-class is grouped together with our active pseudo-class. It's the same darker blue. I'm now going to let go of my mouse so that the anchor tag is clicked, which takes me to the register page. I'm just going to head back, and the get started hyperlink is still our primary base blue. That is this blue over here. It hasn't changed color because the visited pseudo-class is the same as the link pseudo-class. And the exact same thing would happen down here, on this get started button here. As a reminder, we've added the btn secondary class there. Looking in the index.html, scrolling down to the CTA section, you can see btn and btn secondary. So the exact same thing is going to happen now. The hyperlink text is our base purple, whether it's been visited or not. And when I hover and click, it's going to go to that darker shade of purple, which you can see now. Now, just to clarify again, why we're adding our pseudo-classes over here and not to the btn class over here, is that because the state changes that we're going to be coding are only happening on our primary and secondary. There are no changes in state to any of these properties. It's not like when I hover over the button, I'm changing the font or changing the font size. These properties are static. They remain constant no matter what the state is. However, for the specific styling like primary and secondary buttons, we do want to consider state. we want to make our buttons one color in this state and another color in this state. And when we start adding more properties later, and in the CSS box model topic coming up soon, we're going to be adding even more properties in here. Things like background color, which will really make these two groups of pseudo classes even more prominent. Now, one last thing I want to show you before we finish up is I could take a similar approach with this anchor tag here. I could add in pseudo classes just like we did for the link and visited state, as well as the hover and active state. Those styles would be visible down here in this mini navigation bar in our footer. So for example, we could style the anchor tag that when I hover on it, it goes a little bit darker. Now, I'm not going to do that because I want to keep this a bit simpler for now. That style really is not critical for the visual aesthetic of this web page. But for buttons, it is. You always want to be using pseudo classes on your buttons like I've done here. So what did you think of this video? I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments below. Click here to subscribe and click here to move on to the next video in the playlist.